that house was literally 2 blocks away from the last place that I used drugs. There wasn't a whole lot of places left in Kidnap County that I hadn't used drugs or gotten in trouble. They really kind of built a safety net around me, took me under their wing. Volin told me, "Hey, you're the new guy, so you got to go to this fundraiser car wash this weekend." Dropped me off at this gas station and said, "Go talk to the guy sitting at the buckets." I sat down, introduced myself, and we probably chatted for 2 hours. We never washed one car. Nobody else showed up. He's like, "Yeah, it doesn't look like anybody's coming." He's like, "What do you say we go hit a meeting, dump these buckets, go hit a meeting?" And turned out he was in a service position as a fundraiser chair for the chapter of Oxford House for that area. We became instant friends and brothers. He actually took me under his wing and got me involved in service pretty early on, out of myself and out of my poor me pity situation. Really kind of encouraged me to step up, which got me involved. I was involved in service. I lived in that house for 4.5 years, that Oxford House. Needless to say, I'm in quite a few photos, family photos over there. Every time somebody moved out and they refilled that spot, we took another family photo to add them to the family and hung it on the wall. It was about 2010. Oxford House Incorporated approached me, and it was again due to that gentleman who was sitting next to those buckets at the car wash. And said, "Hey, there's an opening in Seattle for an outreach worker position, and we'd love for you to apply." It was over in Seattle, and me being over in Bremerton, it might as well have been a foreign country because I hadn't been able to leave the county for a very long time. But yeah, I talked with my sponsor, and I talked with sponsees and roommates, and they say, "What's the worst that can happen? You go over there, you don't like it, you get the job, you go over there, you get to help one person and realize it's not for you. You got all this to come back to." And so I took a leap of faith. I filled out an application. March of 2010, I was on my way to Seattle to become an outreach worker. And I guess the rest is history. I've been doing it now since 2010 as an employee. I did it for service work for about 4.5, 5 years prior to that. Coming up in this January, God willing, I'll be celebrating 19 years in recovery, which still sounds like it should be coming out of somebody else's mouth most of the time, inconceivable. But I get the benefit of helping to provide the same blessings for other folks that I received. So, and that's what I get to do for a living every day.
I love both of these stories so much. And Ricky, if you write a book, will you please call it Kidnap County, please? Because I think that would sell. I will help you market it. I think that's brilliant. And then I got to ask, and we can edit this out if you don't want to answer this publicly, but what happened to the girl?
Oh, yeah. She actually went on and graduated drug court, and she is still clean today, and she does the same. She works in the service field of helping with people in addiction. We broke up the day after I got an inpatient. I won't get into the exact details of why that was, but it was my fault, 100%. But yeah, she's still clean today as well and doing very well for herself. Yeah.
Well, thanks for answering that. The other thing that I've really enjoyed about this conversation, and this is when I know that I'm in community with people in recovery, it's like we say these things where someone that hasn't walked through what we've walked through, they would not laugh, right? They would not think that was funny. But you're like, well, the cocaine wasn't as good here. It's like, we're like, ha, 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 so that's when I know I'm in good company with my people. Because your stories resonate with me, even if our details are slightly different. Like our humor is the same, and I really appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions. I've never lived in a sober living house or Oxford, but I've had several sponsees that have. So I have visited and I've been in proximity and I know a little bit about them. how do they get more houses? How does that work? Do people donate houses? Does the organization buy houses? I'm really curious about that, the business side of how it actually continues to work.
Well, I can at least speak to Oxford House. I know Jason will have a plethora of information when it comes to Walker. It works. There's quite a few different levels within the Walker organization. So Oxford House is pretty straightforward. We have a simple model for the most part that's laid out on our website. But we get more houses oftentimes. Well, and it's changed over the years. We used to have to beat the streets and hit Greg's List. And if I'm driving down the road and I see a for rent sign, I take a picture of it. And when I get back home, I would call them and ask them about their house. Really, it's a lot of it's just hitting the streets. Nowadays, it's not uncommon to get phone calls from people whose lives have been touched by addiction, have had family members that lived in an Oxford House, and they're doing very well, and offering up, I've got this house, I'd love to give back, and let's see if we can make it an Oxford House. I say, wonderful, I'll ask about the house. Now, Oxford House doesn't own any houses. So we rent from Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Mr. Smith and all over the place. So, various different Zillow, a lot of word of mouth. It's been pretty common. One of the blessings over the years there's been a lot of alumni of Oxford Houses that have grown in their recovery and in their life and eventually get to a point where they are able to buy a house and they want to make it an Oxford House. You know what I mean? So definitely all kinds of different ways on how to make, expand the Oxford House. Of course, we are affected a lot by the economy, like everybody else. You know what I mean? Like everybody else. Sure. The mission statement, of course, is to provide safe and affordable housing for people who are recovering from substance abuse and alcohol and want to stay stopped, right? And so that affordability can definitely play a factor on the expansion, right? Sure. So we oftentimes we do a lot due diligence and looking and investigating and doing our homework on the location before we give a green light to open it as a house. We're looking for obviously safe neighborhood. We're looking for access to 12-step or churches or treatment centers, outpatient, inpatient.
Public transportation, I would imagine, being a big part of it.
That's a big one. We usually are looking for within a half mile to a bus transportation. Depending on. So, the services available, stores nearby. We're trying to make sure there's not a bar next door, you know what I mean? Or something of that nature, a pot store or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? We're looking for a.
How do you do that now that there's one on every corner, like every Starbucks? Corner. How do you do that?
True. Absolutely. It wouldn't necessarily 100% disqualify. However, we really try to lean towards staying away from that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
How many houses does Oxford House have in Washington State?
So currently, right now, there's 247 Oxford Houses spread across the entire state of Washington, spread out. So we're in 26 counties here in Washington State. Oxford House, first men's house, opened up in the late 1900s.
Yes.
1990s, to be exact.
For a long time.
It sounds way bigger when you say the late 1900s. It's like on my horse and buggy. Okay.
And has expanded since then to, we got almost 3,100 beds. So 3,100 beds. We do have 4 different types of houses. We have men's houses. We have women's houses. We have men with children's houses. And we have women with children's houses. Men with children's houses. Yeah, those 4.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask, if you had housing for parents.
Yes, yeah.
That's so amazing.
We don't have any co-ed houses.
Right, so not for a whole family.
Yeah, yeah. But we do have plenty of, that I've experienced, husbands who live in a men's house and wives who live in a women's house, and they working on their recovery and rebuilding their lives and together as well, but living in separate Oxford houses. So sometimes mom and wife and child live in one house and dad lives in a different house. Yeah, definitely over the years, I've seen many and many different walks of life come together utilizing recovery housing. I mean, really giving the safe home base for that to happen.